And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. And this outlook will be for the midweek period, Wednesday into Thursday. So how things are stacking up, we have an area of low pressure that'll be working its way northeastward up into the lower Yukon, Kuskokwim area of the southwest coast. And as that low works its way inland, we'll have a front pushing across the Gulf, of which there will be some secondary development, weaker low form by the time we get into Thursday. And this is going to spread another round of rain and breezier conditions along the Gulf Coast and then into the Panhandle Wednesday night and Thursday. There'll be another system taking a similar track through the western central Aleutians and then crossing the lower Bering on up toward the same general area as we get into Thursday through Friday before coming on shore. So this pattern will hold now into the upcoming Memorial Day weekend, and there'll be another round of rain pushing into the Panhandle about Saturday or so. So we don't expect too much in the way of a change in the pattern until perhaps early June. It looks like by early June there could be stronger ridging develop over northwest Canada. It'll bring warmer, drier conditions to much of the Panhandle up into the central and eastern interior. It'll truly be some summer time warmer temperatures and dry conditions. But in the meantime, getting to that point, we have the one low that works its way inland through the lower Yukon Valley, and then we'll see a secondary weaker area of low pressure here along the northern Gulf Coast with a front, and as that pushes eastward, we will see the IFR conditions expand here across the Panhandle as we get into Wednesday night and Thursday. IFR conditions along the north slope, along the Arctic coast, down through the Bering Strait, northern Bering. Here comes the next system showing up here low out this way with a front arcing ahead of it. So by the time we get into Thursday morning, we see IFR conditions central outer Panhandle coast. IFR continues along the north slope, Arctic coast down through the Chukchi Sea, up through the northern Bering, along areas of the Seward Peninsula, coastline as well as the YK deltas, and then we find the low pressure that's out here just north of the western Aleutians with an arcing front ahead of it. That's just going to march eastward and eventually push inland here in areas of the southwest come late Thursday night and on Friday morning. So even with the system that comes through Wednesday here through the Panhandle, we'll see VFR, MVFR conditions try to redevelop by Thursday afternoon. But it does stay IFR along areas of the North Slope and Arctic coast, as well as through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence, down in through areas of the eastern half of the Bering Sea near, say, St. Matthew, north of St. Paul, and around Nunavik Island outside of Kuskokwim Bay. So past conditions up there in through the east central Brooks Range. VFR for Anatuvik Pass on Wednesday, but you don't fly too much north of there. Once you start getting out toward the North Slope and Arctic coast, MVFR will become IFR. Same thing, Adigan Pass. Generally, VFR conditions are expected during the day Wednesday, but as you fly north of the north entrance there up through the North Slope toward the Arctic coast, look for MVFR becoming IFR. Down along the west arm of the Alaska Range, MVFR conditions, Lake Clark and Merrill, up along through Rainy Pass, even Windy Pass should generally from there west and southwestward hold on to MVFR conditions on Wednesday. But as you go east, MVFR conditions may become a VFR as we get into the later morning and afternoon. Isabel on through the Mentasta Pass, through that eastern portion of the Alaska Range. Down across the Copper River Basin, generally VFR conditions expected at Tanita Pass. But as you get down toward the Gulf Coast, Portage Pass should generally be MVFR conditions. Mid-pass out through the east entrance into Prince William Sound, but the west entrance on Wednesday should generally stay VFR for Portage Pass. And then finally, Chilkoot and White in the far north end of the Panhandle, we're looking at VFR conditions becoming MVFR on Wednesday. Freezing levels at the surface, we find the freezing line running up here through the northern Bering, up along the Bering Strait, along the spine of the Brooks Range. Pockets of near or below freezing temperatures in through the mountainous areas of northwest Canada and toward the southeast part of the state. But freezing levels aloft do bump up. There's this general weak ridging that nudges into along the Alcan border toward the Brooks Range. Not very strong, but enough to bring some warmer temperatures to the Yukon Flats. Down here, though, we find a bump in the freezing levels aloft, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 feet out over the Gulf. So we do expect, with the front that's working its way eastward, mainly rain here along the Gulf Coast. And then behind me, the next system way out here, entering the western Aleutians and then pushing up into the lower southwest quadrant of the Bering Sea. Ahead of that, the frontal system will bump upwards of 6,000 feet along the western central Aleutians, and then south of there, above 8,000 and 10,000 feet. The greatest threat for any icing in cloud or associated with thicker cloud cover and precipitation on Wednesday out over the Gulf, say areas east of Prince William Sound, Yakutat into off the west coast there, outside of, say, Glacier Bay Park, and that above 5,000 feet. You go a little further south, though, it bumps upward above 10,000 feet in through the lower Gulf, simply because the freezing levels aloft are higher. Colder pool of air with the low that's coming into the lower Yukon-Kuskokwim area on Wednesday. There's a colder pool of air in this region, so you get above cloud level. Once you get into the clouds above 3,000 feet, there's that potential for some moderate icing. And then back here with that next system, low pressure out over here, we could see above 5,000 feet here through areas of the central western Aleutians, and you get south of the Aleutian chain into the North Pacific, up above 10,000 feet would be the freezing levels and the likelihood of any icing. So the 30,000 foot jet stream level has one trough pushing through into the Gulf here on Wednesday. There's kind of then another little ridge with a jet streak of 120, 125 knot northwesterly flow across the southeast corner of the Bering Sea and the Alaska Peninsula. And then here's the next trough with the next area of low pressure in the western Aleutians ahead of it, 115 to 125 knot jet max associated there at 30,000 feet. And then broader winds down here at 700 millibars or 9,000 feet. We find a belt of winds across areas of the southeast Bering, Alaska Peninsula, North Pacific on the order of 35 to 40 knots with some embedded pockets of 45, 50 knot winds. And then back here, there is definitely, with the low that's emerging into the southwest corner of the Bering Sea, along southeast of that low circulation, we do find winds 50 to as high as 65 knots along from about the central Aleutians back down into the North Pacific. And then at 3,000 feet, we have the front Wednesday working its way eastward along the Gulf Coast, and ahead of it we could see winds south, southeasterly, 40 to as high as 45 knots, kind of like one of these barrier jets as you get those winds bump up along the intercoastal mountains. And then back to the west, northwesterly flow about 30 to 40 knots. And then here's the circulation around that low center, back way out toward the western Aleutians. Some winds 45, 50 knots to the north of the center, and a broader area of 50 to near 60 knot winds. And as a result, we expect the greatest threat for any turbulence. There could be a little bit of turbulence here along the northern Gulf Coast, but more notably as we extend out along the Alaska Peninsula, we will find some isolated moderate turbulence surface to 4,000 feet. And then back out here into the central, even western Aleutians, we could see some areas of moderate turbulence. I imagine even further west as you get out towards Shimmy and west of there definitely could be some moderate turbulence associated with that next low that will be entering into the southwest portion of the Bering Sea.